She showed me the ultrasound photo. She said, "It's yours." I cried. I believed her. But it was never real. And by the time I found out, the money was already gone. I'm sitting here now, back in Phoenix, staring at my empty bank account, and I need to tell this story, not for sympathy, not for forgiveness, just because the truth needs to be said out loud, even if it makes me look like the biggest fool who ever lived. I wasn't planning on revisiting this tonight, but a few days ago, I opened my email and found a message from a longtime viewer of this channel. He said he'd been watching quietly for a while, taking in each story but never commenting until now. His words poured out, raw and unpolished, but honest. He told me how he, too, had believed the wrong person, how he'd given everything in the name of love, only to end up hollow and betrayed. Reading that email, I felt a storm inside me. First came disbelief, that strange jolt of recognition when someone else's story mirrors your own heartbreak. Then came anger, not at him, but at how easily good men can be played for fools. And finally, a deep, quiet sadness settled in, because I knew exactly how heavy his silence must have felt, carrying a shame you don't dare admit to anyone else. That email is why I'm speaking now. It reminded me that none of us are as alone as we think. So before I continue, I want to pause and thank you. Yes, you watching this right now. Please drop a comment and let me know where in the world you're tuning in from. I read them all, and it means more than you know. And for those of you who keep coming back, video after video, I owe you a super thank you. You are the reason I can keep sitting here and opening my chest to the world. Please like this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and join the conversation down below. Because tonight, I'm ready to tell you everything. Let me take you back to where it all started. Her name was Lalida. The moment she placed that folded photo in my hand at the street cafe in Chiang Mai, everything changed. "Marshall," she whispered, her voice trembling like autumn leaves. "I need to show you something very important." Her fingers were shaking as she unfolded the black and white image with the care of someone handling precious glass. An ultrasound, a tiny shape in the darkness that looked like hope itself, floating in a sea of medical mystery. "It's ours," she said, her eyes filling with tears that caught the afternoon sunlight streaming through the cafe windows. I stared at that photo like it was a winning lottery ticket, like it was proof that miracles still happen to broken men like me. At 63 years old, after losing my wife Sarah to cancer 3 years ago, after watching my world collapse into silence and takeout containers and nights that stretched forever, I never thought I'd feel this again, the chance to matter, to be needed, to build something that would outlast my own mortality. "Are you absolutely sure?" I asked, my voice cracking like a teenager asking a girl to prom. She nodded slowly and reached across the table to take my weathered hand in her soft one. "I'm scared, Marshall, but I'm happy too. We made something beautiful together." I couldn't stop the tears. Right there in that busy cafe, surrounded by the chaos of Thai voices and motor scooters and vendors calling out their daily specials, I broke down like a dam giving way to flood waters. This beautiful woman, 28 years younger than me, was carrying my child. My child. The child I'd given up hoping for decades ago. The waitress probably thought I was having a breakdown, but I was having the opposite. I was coming back to life. Let me back up 6 months. I met Lalida at a pharmacy counter in Chiang Mai, of all places. I'd moved to Thailand after cashing out my early retirement from the insurance company back in Phoenix. 40 years of adjusting claims, 40 years of measuring other people's losses and calculating their pain in neat dollar amounts, and then my own loss hit me like a freight train carrying nothing but grief. Sarah's cancer took 18 months to kill her, but it killed me too. I just kept breathing out of habit, kept going through the motions because stopping seemed like too much work. After the funeral, after selling the house that held 40 years of memories, after months of staring at the same 4 walls and wondering why I was still taking up space on this planet, I bought a one-way ticket to Thailand. I'd heard guys at the insurance office talk about it over coffee and donuts. Cheap living, warm weather, beautiful women who didn't mind older men. Maybe a chance to start over, or at least a warm place to finish dying. I wasn't looking for love when I stepped off that plane in Bangkok. I was looking for a reason to keep existing, maybe a reason to stop dreading tomorrow. That Tuesday afternoon in Chiang Mai, I was picking up antacids for my nervous stomach, the kind of stomach that comes from too much whiskey and not enough hope. The pharmacy was small, tucked between a noodle shop that smelled like heaven and a tailor who seemed to work 24 hours a day. The girl behind the counter had the kindest eyes I'd ever seen, the kind of eyes that made you believe the world wasn't completely broken. When I struggled with the Thai pronunciation of what I needed, pointing at my stomach like a caveman, she smiled and switched to perfect English with just a hint of accent that made everything sound like music. "You are American?" she asked, her voice soft as silk. "Yes. From Arizona." "Arizona," she repeated, like she was tasting the word and finding it delicious. "Very hot there, I think." "Not as hot as your smile," I said, immediately regretting how cheesy it sounded, how desperate it made me seem. But she laughed. Actually laughed. Not the polite laugh I'd gotten used to from other locals who were just being professionally nice to the sad old farang, a real one that lit up her whole face. "My name is Lalida," she said, extending her hand across the counter. "Marshall," I replied, shaking that soft hand and feeling electricity I thought was dead forever. "Very nice to meet you, Marshall, from hot Arizona." That was it. That was how it started. Not with fireworks or dramatic music or any of the nonsense they put in movies. Just a tired old man buying stomach medicine and meeting a sweet girl who didn't seem to mind talking to him. We started slow, like two people who'd both been hurt before and weren't in any hurry to get hurt again. Coffee after her shift at a little place that served the best iced coffee I'd ever tasted. Walks through the Saturday night market where she'd point out fruits I'd never seen before and laugh when I made faces at the unfamiliar tastes. "You are funny, Marshall," she'd say, covering her mouth when she giggled. "Very different from Thai men." I asked her what she meant, genuinely curious about her world. "Thai men, they don't listen much. They talk about themselves, about work, about money, about politics. Always talking, never listening. But you ask me questions. You want to know what I think about things." She was right. I did want to know. Everything about her fascinated me, like I was discovering a new species of human being. How she'd grown up in a village 2 hours north where her family grew rice and raised chickens. How she moved to Chiang Mai at 18 to work and send money back to her parents who were getting older and couldn't work the farm like they used to. How she'd never been married but wanted children someday, a whole house full of them running around and causing beautiful chaos. How she'd learned English watching American movies and dreamed of seeing the Grand Canyon someday. "What about you?" she asked one evening as we sat by the Ping River watching the sun turn the water into liquid gold. "Did you have children with your wife?" The question hit me harder than I expected, like a punch I should have seen coming. "We tried for years," I said, my voice getting thick. "Spent a fortune on doctors and treatments and hope. But it just never happened. Sarah said maybe it wasn't meant to be, that maybe we were supposed to pour our love into each other instead." Lalida reached over and touched my arm with fingers that felt like butterfly wings. "I'm sorry, Marshall. That must have hurt your heart very much." It did hurt. Even talking about it with her, 3 years after Sarah's death, still hurt like a wound that refused to heal. But somehow, having her gentle hand on my arm made it bearable, made it feel like maybe the pain had a purpose after all. "Maybe it wasn't meant to be then," she said quietly, her voice barely audible over the river's whisper. "But maybe now is different time. Maybe universe has different plan now." I looked at her in the lamplight, this gentle creature who seemed to see something in me I'd forgotten was there, and for the first time in years, I felt something that might have been hope. 3 months later, everything changed again. I was reading a paperback thriller on my apartment balcony, trying to lose myself in someone else's problems, when she showed up unannounced. She looked pale, shaken, like she'd seen something that scared her. "Marshall, I need to talk to you about something very important." We sat on my cheap couch, and she twisted her hands in her lap like she was trying to solve a puzzle with her fingers. "I think I might be pregnant." The words hit me like cold water, like stepping into a shower before it warms up. "Pregnant?" I managed to say, my brain struggling to process the information. She nodded without looking at me, staring at her hands instead. "I missed my period. I'm never late, never. Always very regular, like clockwork. And I feel different, sick in the mornings, tired all the time. I should have been scared. At my age, with my health, with my bank account that wasn't built for supporting a family, I should have panicked and run for the hills. Instead, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, maybe decades. Purpose. Meaning, a reason to stick around and see what happened next. Okay, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Okay, we'll figure this out together. We'll go to a clinic tomorrow and find out for sure. No, she said quickly, finally looking at me with eyes that seemed scared and hopeful at the same time. I mean, I want to be absolutely sure first before we do anything. I'll go alone tomorrow. It's better that way. I wanted to argue, wanted to insist that we face this together like partners should, but she seemed so fragile, so overwhelmed by the possibility that I didn't want to add to her stress. Whatever you need, I said, reaching over to take her hand. Just know that whatever happens, whatever we find out, we'll handle it together. You're not alone in this. She looked at me then with those beautiful brown eyes that seemed to hold entire universes. Really? You're not angry? You're not going to run away? Angry? Lalida, I'm 63 years old. If you're pregnant, if we're having a baby together, that's not a problem. That's a miracle. That's the kind of thing that makes a man believe in God again. She started crying then, and I held her against my chest. I felt her small body shake with sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep and broken inside her, and I whispered promises into her black hair. Promises I meant with every fiber of my being. Promises that would end up costing me everything I had. The next day felt like the longest day of my life, like time had slowed down just to torture me. She texted me at noon. At clinic now. Very nervous. At 2, still waiting to see doctor. So many people here. At 4:30, when I was pacing my apartment like a caged tiger. Finished. Coming to see you now. We need to talk. When she knocked on my door 30 minutes later, her eyes were red from crying, but there was something different in her expression. Something that looked like joy fighting with terror, like she couldn't decide whether to celebrate or hide. Well? I asked, my heart hammering so hard I was sure she could hear it. She reached into her small purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper with the careful reverence of someone handling a sacred text. A doctor's note covered in Thai script that might as well have been hieroglyphics. You are going to be a father, Marshall. I grabbed her and lifted her off the ground, spinning her around my tiny living room like we were 20 years old and had just gotten engaged. A father, I kept repeating like a mantra. I'm going to be a father. At 63, I'm going to be a father. We held each other and cried and laughed and made plans that felt as solid as concrete and as fragile as soap bubbles. She said she wanted to stop working at the pharmacy immediately. Rest is very important for baby, she said, one hand already resting protectively on her still flat stomach. And stress is very bad. Doctor says I need to be very careful, especially first few months. I agreed immediately, without even thinking about the financial implications. Of course she should rest. Of course she shouldn't work. Of course she should do whatever was best for our child. I calculated quickly in my head, running numbers like I used to do back at the insurance company. My retirement savings could handle supporting both of us, especially here where everything was so affordable compared to Arizona. How much do you make at the pharmacy? I asked. She looked embarrassed, like the amount was somehow shameful. Not very much. Maybe 15,000 baht per month. About $450. I could cover that easily, maybe even double it to make sure she was comfortable. Don't worry about money, I told her, meaning every word. I'll take care of everything. You just take care of yourself and our baby. The next morning, I walked to the bank like a man on a mission and wired 40,000 baht to her account. Enough for almost 3 months of her salary, enough to show her that I was serious about this, that I was all in. She cried when I showed her the transfer confirmation on my phone. Marshall, this is too much. I don't need so much money. Nothing is too much for our family, I said, and the word family felt foreign and familiar at the same time, like putting on clothes that used to fit perfectly. Family. Within a week, she'd quit the pharmacy, telling them she needed to focus on her health. Within 2 weeks, we were looking at bigger apartments that could accommodate a growing family. Baby will need space to play, she said, standing in an empty bedroom that cost twice what my current place did. And I need proper kitchen for cooking healthy food. Very important for baby's development. I signed the lease that afternoon without even haggling over the price. Another 35,000 baht for the deposit, plus the first 2 months' rent in advance. When I handed over the thick stack of cash, the Thai landlord smiled and shook my hand with both of his. Very lucky man, he said in broken English. Beautiful wife, baby coming soon. Very good life ahead. Wife. We hadn't talked about marriage yet, but the word sounded right, sounded like something that was meant to happen. That evening, as we sat in our new empty living room eating takeout pad thai from styrofoam containers and planning where to put the furniture, Lalida rested her head on my shoulder. Are you happy, Marshall? Really happy? Happier than I've been in years, I said, and I meant it more than I'd ever meant anything. Happier than I thought was possible for someone my age. I was hemorrhaging money faster than I ever had in my life, but I didn't care. Money was just numbers on a bank statement, just pieces of paper with dead presidents on them. This was real life. This was love. This was the second chance I never thought I'd get. The miracle that made all those years of loneliness worth something. I want to be good mother, she said quietly, her voice muffled against my shoulder. Best mother possible for our child. And I want to be the father I never got to be before, I said. We're going to be a real family. A happy family. She smiled and took my hand, placing it gently on her stomach that was still flat but somehow felt different, felt full of possibility. Our baby is so lucky to have you as daddy. I fell asleep that night with my hand still on her belly, imagining tiny heartbeats and first steps and birthday parties and all the moments I thought I'd missed forever. The spending accelerated after that like a snowball rolling downhill, gathering momentum and size with each passing week. Baby clothes from the expensive shops downtown where everything was imported and cost 5 times what it should. Must be very good quality for our precious child, she'd say, holding up tiny shirts that cost more than most people made in a day. Prenatal vitamins and supplements from the fancy pharmacies that catered to wealthy expats. Doctor says Western vitamins much better than Thai ones. Better for baby's brain development. A new Honda motorcycle so she could get around the city without having to walk in the heat or take crowded Songthaeus. Too much walking, very bad for pregnancy. And public transport too dirty, too many germs. 5,000 baht here for special pregnancy clothes, 10,000 there for organic food that would help the baby grow strong, 15,000 for the security deposit on an even nicer apartment we'd eventually move to when the baby came and needed more space. Every request seemed reasonable in isolation. Every expense seemed like an investment in our future together. I stopped looking at my bank statements because the numbers were starting to scare me, and I didn't want fear to poison this beautiful thing we were building together. When my buddy Ken, another American expat who'd been living in Thailand for 5 years, asked me over beers at our usual bar how much I was spending on my new girlfriend, I lied without hesitation. Not much, really. Maybe 20,000 baht a month. She's very conservative with money, very careful. He whistled low and shook his head. Brother, that's still $700 a month. That's a lot of money here. You sure she's not taking advantage of your generous nature? I felt anger rise in my chest like bile. She's pregnant, Ken. She's carrying my child. She needs things, and she needs to be comfortable and stress-free. It's not like I'm spending it on myself or throwing it away on stupid shit. He raised his hands in surrender and changed the subject, but I could see the concern in his eyes, the kind of concern that comes from watching too many good men get taken for rides by women who knew exactly which buttons to push. Concern I chose to ignore because acknowledging it would mean acknowledging that maybe I was being played and I wasn't ready to face that possibility. Men like Ken just didn't understand what it meant to have a second chance at fatherhood at my age. They didn't know what it felt like to matter again, to have someone depend on you, to be building something that would outlast your own mortality. By month 3 of the pregnancy, things started to feel different in ways I couldn't quite put my finger on. Little things at first, subtle changes in her behavior that I told myself were just normal pregnancy hormones. She'd hide her phone when I walked into the room, flipping it face down or sliding it into her pocket with movements that seemed almost practiced. She'd take calls in the bathroom with the water running, speaking in rapid Thai that I couldn't understand even if I could hear it clearly. Who was that? I'd ask when she emerged, trying to keep my voice casual and uninterested. Just my sister, she'd say, not meeting my eyes. She worries about me, calls to check that baby is okay. But her sister seemed to call a lot. Multiple times a day, always when I was around, always requiring long conversations in locked bathrooms or out on the balcony where I couldn't overhear. She stopped wanting to go out to dinner at the restaurants we used to frequent. Too tired, she'd say, one hand resting on her stomach that still didn't show any sign of growth. Baby makes me very sleepy all the time. Doctor says this normal, but I need lots of rest. She stopped wanting to take evening walks by the river where we'd fallen in love. Too hot and humid. Not good for baby. All that sweating and exertion. She stopped wanting to do much of anything except stay in the apartment I was paying for, watching Thai soap operas and asking for more money with increasing frequency. Marshall, I need to go to doctor again. Special ultrasound to check baby's development. Costs 8,000 baht, but very important. Marshall, my mother called. She's very sick with diabetes and needs medicine. Can you help with 10,000 baht? I pay you back when I can work again. Marshall, I need to buy special imported food for proper baby nutrition. Very expensive, but doctor says crucial for healthy development. I never said no. The word seemed to have been erased from my vocabulary where she was concerned. But I started asking questions that made her fidget and look away. Can I come with you to the doctor appointments? I'd love to hear the baby's heartbeat. Better if I go alone. Doctor speaks only Thai, very confusing for foreigners. And waiting room very crowded, very uncomfortable. Can I meet your mother when we visit her? Maybe I can help in other ways too. She very traditional, very shy with Western men. Maybe later, when she feeling better and baby is born. Can we video call her together so I can at least say hello and let her know I'm taking good care of you? Her English not good at all. She gets embarrassed trying to speak with foreigners. Better to wait. Every answer made perfect sense when considered individually. She was protecting me from awkward cultural situations. She was managing family drama without burdening me. She was being considerate of my time and comfort. But together, all these reasonable explanations formed a pattern that made my stomach churn with something that might have been intuition or might have been paranoia. I chose to believe it was paranoia, because the alternative was too horrible to consider. Month 4 brought what I thought was the worst news of my entire life. The phone call that would haunt my dreams for months afterward. She called me in the middle of the afternoon, crying so hard I could barely understand the words coming through the sobs. Marshall, something terrible wrong. I'm bleeding. Heavy bleeding. I need to go to hospital right now. My heart stopped. Actually stopped for what felt like several seconds before starting again with irregular, panicked beats. I'm coming. Which hospital? I'll meet you there. No, don't come. I'm too scared and confused. My friend is taking me. I need to handle this the Thai way first. Lalida, I should be there with you. This is our baby we're talking about. Let me be there to support you. Please, Marshall. This very private thing in Thai culture. Women handle alone first, then tell husband after we know what happening. I call you as soon as I know something, I promise. I spent the next 8 hours pacing my apartment like a caged animal, calling her phone every 20 minutes and getting voicemail every time. I researched the symptoms of miscarriage on the internet until I'd scared myself into believing she might die along with our baby. I called every hospital in Chiang Mai trying to find her, but none of them would give me information about patients, especially when I couldn't even spell her last name correctly. When she finally called back at almost midnight, her voice was hollow and empty, like someone had sucked all the life out of it. I lost the baby, Marshall. Our baby is gone. The words hit me like a physical blow, like someone had punched me in the chest and knocked all the air out of my lungs. I sat down hard on my couch and tried to remember how to breathe. What happened? What did the doctors say? They say sometimes this happens in first months. Nothing wrong that I did, nothing I could prevent, just happens sometimes to some women. Very sad but very common. Her voice was flat, emotionless, like she was reading from a script. I'm coming over right now. We need to be together. We need to help each other through this. No, please, Marshall. I need time alone to process this loss. In Thai culture, woman needs private time when this happens. Time to grieve without having to take care of anyone else's feelings. I wanted to argue, wanted to tell her that grief shared was grief halved, that we should be holding each other and crying together and planning how to heal together. But she sounded so broken, so fragile, like one more emotional demand might shatter her completely. Okay, I said, hating myself for agreeing but not knowing what else to do. But I'm here whenever you're ready, and don't worry about money or rent or anything practical. I'll take care of everything while you heal from this. Thank you, she whispered, and for the first time in the conversation, she sounded genuinely grateful. You are very good man, Marshall. I'm sorry I failed you. Sorry I couldn't give you the baby you wanted so much. You didn't fail anyone. These things happen, and it's nobody's fault. We'll get through this together, and maybe we can try again when you're ready. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my computer and transferred 60,000 baht to her account, enough to cover all her expenses for months while she recovered from this tragedy. Enough to show her that losing the baby hadn't changed how I felt about her, hadn't made me love her any less. I thought I was being supportive and understanding. I thought I was being the kind of man who stands by his woman during the worst moments of her life. I thought I was showing love the only way I knew how, with actions instead of just words. What I was actually doing was paying for my own elaborate destruction, funding a performance that would have made Broadway actors jealous. For the next month, she barely responded to my texts and calls. Still, too sad. She'd reply when she bothered to respond at all. Need more time to heal my heart. I offered to bring food to her apartment, to clean and do laundry, to just sit with her in silence while she grieved. She declined everything except the money I kept sending. Just for basic needs, she'd say. Food and rent and medicine for depression. Thank you for understanding and being patient with me. I understood nothing. I was drowning in confusion and grief and loneliness that felt worse than anything I'd experienced since Sarah's death, sending money into what felt like a black hole and telling myself it was love, telling myself it was what good men do when the women they care about are suffering. Then Ken sent me a message that would change everything, a simple text that arrived on a Tuesday morning while I was drinking coffee and wondering if I'd ever see Lalida smile again. Brother, you need to see this. Meet me at the cafe on Nimmenhamen Road in an hour. Bring your phone. When I got there, Ken was sitting at a corner table with his laptop open and an expression on his face that I'd never seen before, something between pity and anger and disgust. Sit down, he said, and prepare yourself for something that's going to hurt. He turned the laptop toward me, and on the screen was a photograph that made my vision blur around the edges. It was taken outside a 7-Eleven about 6 blocks from Lalida's apartment building. The timestamp showed it was from just 2 days earlier, during the period when she was supposedly too devastated by grief to see me. There she was, my mourning girlfriend, wrapped around a Thai man I'd never seen before like they were posing for a romantic comedy poster. They were laughing, their faces bright with joy that had nothing to do with sorrow. She was wearing a tight red dress that showed off a completely flat stomach with no sign of recent pregnancy, recent or otherwise. There was no trace of grief in her expression, no hint of the emotional devastation she'd been describing to me over the phone. There was only the unmistakable look of a woman who was very much in love with someone who wasn't me. I stared at that photograph for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, my brain refusing to process what my eyes were seeing. Where did you get this? I asked, my voice sounding strange and distant even to myself. My girlfriend took it. She was shopping and recognized Lalida from when you introduced us at that restaurant. She thought it was weird seeing her with another guy, so she snapped a photo. Ken's voice was gentle, like he was talking to someone who'd just been diagnosed with a terminal illness. I'm sorry, brother. I really hoped I was wrong about her. I kept staring at the photo, looking for some explanation that would make this make sense. Some way to reconcile the laughing woman in the red dress with the grief-stricken partner who'd been too sad to see me. Maybe it's an old photo. Maybe your girlfriend is mistaken about the date. Marshall, Ken said quietly. Look at the newspaper stand behind them. You can see yesterday's date on the headline. He was right. There it was in black and white, proof that this photo was taken during the period when Lalida was supposedly in mourning for our lost child, when she was too fragile to leave her apartment or speak to me for more than a few minutes at a time. I closed the laptop and sat back in my chair, feeling something inside my chest crack like ice on a frozen pond. I need to call her. Are you sure that's a good idea right now? Maybe you should take some time to think about what you want to say. But I was already dialing her number, my fingers moving automatically while my brain struggled to catch up with reality. She answered on the third ring. Marshall, I told you I'm not ready to talk much yet. We need to talk. Now. I said I need more time. Please respect my healing process. I'm coming over to your apartment. We're going to talk face to face. No, please. I'm not dressed appropriately for visitors. I looked terrible from crying so much. My voice, when it came out, was calmer than I expected it to be. Lalida, I saw the photo. The one of you and the Thai man outside 7-Eleven 2 days ago. You looked pretty happy for someone who's grieving. The silence that followed was so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, in a voice that sounded completely different from the broken woman I'd been talking to for weeks, "What photo?" "The one my friend took of you with some guy. The one where you're wearing a red dress and laughing like you don't have a care in the world." Another pause, and I could almost hear the gears turning in her head as she calculated her next move. That was my cousin. He was helping me buy groceries because I'm too weak to shop alone. "Your cousin?" "Yes. My family is helping me during this very difficult time. Sometimes getting out for small errands helps with the sadness." "Right. Your family. The same family that lives far away and doesn't approve of foreigners, but now they're helping you buy groceries in Chiang Mai." "Marshall, you are being crazy and jealous. This is exactly why I need space from you. You don't trust me even when I'm suffering." The word crazy hit me like a slap. I'm being crazy? I'm being fucking crazy? "Lalida, I've given you over $70,000 in the last 5 months. $70,000. For what? For lies about a baby that never existed? For our baby that died?" She screamed into the phone, and for a moment she sounded almost convincing. "For the child we lost? How can you be so cruel about something so tragic?" "What baby?" I was screaming too now, 4 months of frustration and confusion and growing suspicion finally exploding out of me. "What fucking baby, Lalida? You were never pregnant, were you? It was all bullshit from the very beginning. You are horrible, horrible man with no heart and no soul. I never want to see you again." The line went dead with a finality that sounded like a coffin closing. 20 minutes later, when I tried to call back, her number was disconnected. By that evening, she'd blocked me on every social media platform where we'd been connected. By the next morning, when I went to her apartment building with flowers and an apology for losing my temper, ready to try to work things out like adults, the security guard told me she'd moved out 3 days earlier. I sat in my apartment that night and did something I'd been avoiding for months. I opened my banking app and forced myself to look at the numbers that had been haunting the edges of my consciousness. The damage was even worse than I'd imagined. Over $78,000 transferred to her account in less than 5 months. $78,000 for ultrasound photos that probably came from a quick Google search. For a pregnancy that existed only in her imagination and my desperate need to believe in something beautiful. For a future that was never real, never possible, never anything more than an elaborate con game designed to separate a lonely old man from his retirement savings. I'd bought baby clothes for a child who didn't exist, clothes that were probably resold to other expecting parents within hours of my purchase. I'd researched international schools for phantom students and dual citizenship for imaginary children. I'd imagined birthday parties and Christmas mornings and graduation days and wedding dances that would never happen because there was no baby, had never been a baby, would never be a baby. The apartment I'd furnished for our life together felt like a museum dedicated to my own stupidity. The crib I'd spent hours assembling sat in the corner like a monument to delusion. The tiny clothes hanging in the closet looked like evidence in a trial where I was both the victim and the defendant, both the fool and the jury that would judge that fool. I was 63 years old, and I'd been played like a child who still believed in Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny and the possibility that love could conquer all obstacles, including common sense. But here's the thing that still haunts me, the truth that makes this story even more pathetic than it already is. For those 5 months, even as the money drained out of my accounts like water through a broken dam, even as the red flags piled up like evidence at a crime scene, even as the lies got bigger and more obvious and more insulting to my intelligence, I was happy. Genuinely, deeply, completely happy for the first time since Sarah's death. For the first time in years, I had a reason to wake up in the morning that wasn't just habit or stubbornness. I had someone who needed me, someone who was building a future with me, someone who made me feel like more than just a walking ATM waiting to die alone in a foreign country. I had purpose and meaning and hope, emotions I'd thought were dead and buried with my wife. The money wasn't even the worst part of this disaster. The worst part was that even now, sitting here in my empty Phoenix apartment with my decimated bank account and my shattered illusions, part of me still missed it. Part of me still missed the feeling of being needed, even if that need was manufactured and monetized. Part of me still missed having someone to take care of, even if that someone was systematically destroying my financial future. Part of me still missed the dream of fatherhood, even knowing it was built on quicksand and lies and my own desperate loneliness. Part of me still missed feeling like I mattered to someone, even if I only mattered as a source of income. The aftermath was quieter than I expected. I don't scream when I get scammed. I don't make dramatic scenes or demand justice or threaten lawsuits that would only cost me more money I don't have. I just sat by the Ping River where Lalida and I used to walk and talk about our imaginary future, and I let the truth wash over me like dirty water that eventually runs clean if you let it flow long enough. There was no baby. There had never been a baby. There was never going to be a baby. There was just me, a lonely old man trying to fill a hole in his life that was shaped exactly like the family he'd never had, and a woman smart enough to recognize that hole and exploit it with surgical precision. I started the process of leaving Thailand the way you start the process of amputating a limb that's gone gangrenous, methodically, without emotion, accepting that sometimes survival requires cutting away things that used to be part of you. I sold off the furniture I'd bought for our imaginary life together, getting maybe 30 cents on the dollar from Thai buyers who could smell desperation from across the room. I canceled the lease on the bigger apartment where our phantom child was supposed to take his first steps. I packed my belongings into a single suitcase, amazed at how little I actually needed when everything decorative and hopeful was stripped away. Then I called my daughter back in Phoenix, the one real relationship I'd been neglecting while chasing fairy tales in Southeast Asia. "Dad?" Sarah Jr.'s voice came through the international connection, and just hearing it made me realize how much I'd missed the sound of someone who actually cared about my welfare. "Is everything okay? You sound different." "I'm coming home, sweetheart." There was a pause, and I could hear her trying to process this unexpected news. "Home? But I thought you loved it there. You always talked about how peaceful it was, how much better you felt." "I did love it, but it's time to come back to reality." I didn't tell her about Lalida. I didn't tell her about the money that was gone forever. I didn't tell her about the phantom pregnancy or the ultrasound photos or the elaborate con game that had consumed 5 months of my life and most of my savings. Some mistakes are too embarrassing to share, even with family, especially with family who'd warned me about moving to Thailand in the first place, who'd suggested maybe I wasn't thinking clearly in my grief. "Are you sure, Dad? You don't have to come back for my sake. I want you to be happy wherever that is." But happiness, I was learning, wasn't something you could buy with retirement savings or find in the arms of someone young enough to be your daughter. Happiness was something more elusive, something that required facing reality instead of running from it. "I'm sure," I told her. "Book me a flight for next week." The airport in Bangkok was the same as when I'd arrived 18 months earlier, but I was a completely different person walking through those corridors toward my gate. When I'd first come to Thailand, I was running away from grief and loneliness and the crushing weight of a life that felt finished. Now I was running toward something I couldn't quite name yet, but it felt like acceptance. Maybe even wisdom, though wisdom that costs $78,000 seems like a pretty expensive education. The flight attendant who checked my boarding pass was young and pretty, with the kind of smile that would have made me wonder, 6 months ago, if she might be interested in an older American man with a comfortable pension. Now I just saw a professional doing her job, being polite to passengers because that's what her training manual told her to do. Maybe that was progress. Maybe learning to see people as they actually are instead of as characters in the stories we tell ourselves about our lives is worth something, even if it comes at a bankrupting price. During the 15-hour flight back to Phoenix, I had plenty of time to think about what I'd lost and what I'd learned and whether any of it added up to something meaningful or just expensive. The woman in the seat next to me was reading a romance novel about a wealthy older man who sweeps a beautiful young woman off her feet and gives her everything her heart desires. I wanted to tap her on the shoulder and tell her that in real life, it's usually the other way around. In real life, the beautiful young woman sweeps the older man off his feet and gives herself everything his bank account can provide. But I kept my mouth shut and stared out the window at clouds that looked like cotton balls from 30,000 feet, thinking about how perspective changes everything, how distance makes even the most solid things look insubstantial. Back in Phoenix, my daughter picked me up at the airport in her sensible Honda Civic, the same car I'd helped her buy when she graduated college 10 years earlier. She looked older than I remembered, more tired, more like her mother every time I saw her. "You look thinner," she said as we drove through the desert landscape that had once felt like home and now felt like an alien planet. "Have you been eating okay?" "I'm fine," I lied, because explaining that I'd lost weight from stress and worry and the kind of heartbreak that makes food taste like cardboard would require explaining everything else, and I wasn't ready for that conversation. Maybe I'd never be ready for that conversation. We drove in comfortable silence for a while, past strip malls and chain restaurants and all the familiar landmarks of a life I'd tried to leave behind. "I kept your room exactly the way you left it," she said as we pulled into her driveway. "Just in case you decided to come back. Just in case." Like she'd known all along that my grand adventure in Southeast Asia was really just an expensive detour on the way back to where I started. Like she'd been waiting for me to figure out what she already knew, that running away from problems doesn't solve them, it just gives them time to compound interest. That night, lying in the guest room that used to be my office, surrounded by boxes of things I'd been too sentimental to throw away and too practical to keep, I did the math one more time. $78,000 over 5 months. That's more than $15,000 a month, more than most people make in salary. For what? For the privilege of believing in something beautiful that was never real. For the opportunity to feel needed and important and like my life still had chapters left to write. For the chance to play father to a child who existed only in carefully crafted lies and my own desperate imagination. Was it worth it? The question kept me awake until 3 a.m, staring at the ceiling and listening to the sounds of suburban Phoenix settling into sleep around me. Here's what I decided. Sometime between the mockingbird outside my window stopping its midnight singing and the garbage trucks starting their pre-dawn rounds, the money was gone, and I was never getting it back. Lalida was probably living very comfortably on my former retirement savings, maybe planning her next romantic investment opportunity with another lonely foreign man who needed to believe in love more than he needed to believe in common sense. The baby I'd imagined holding and teaching to ride a bicycle and walking down the aisle at his wedding was never going to exist, had never existed, would never be anything more than a few pixels on a smartphone screen and a story I'd tell myself during the sleepless hours when regret feels heavier than gravity. But for 5 months, I'd felt alive again. For 5 months I'd had hope and purpose and a reason to check my phone in the morning for something other than news about wars and politicians and celebrities I didn't care about. For 5 months, I'd believed in the possibility that good things could still happen to me, that my story wasn't over, that maybe the universe had been saving the best plot twist for last. And maybe, in some cosmic accounting system that measures things more valuable than money, that belief was worth what it cost me. I'm not saying I'm grateful for being conned. I'm not saying I'd do it again if I had the chance. I'm not saying that anyone should follow my example, or that there's some hidden wisdom in being systematically deceived by someone who saw your loneliness from across a pharmacy counter and calculated exactly how much it was worth. What I'm saying is that the alternative to being fooled by love is never taking the risk at all. Never opening your heart to the possibility that someone might actually want to build something real with you. Never believing that miracles can happen to ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances. And that alternative, that safe and sensible and utterly joyless approach to whatever time I have left on this planet, feels like a different kind of death. A slower one, maybe, but just as final. People will say I was stupid, and they'll be right. People will say I should have known better, and they'll be right about that too. People will say a man my age should be smarter about women and money, and the intersection of loneliness and desperation, and they'll be absolutely right about all of it. But they'll be missing the point, which is that sometimes being smart means missing out on everything that makes life worth living. Sometimes being careful means being dead inside. Sometimes protecting yourself from being hurt means protecting yourself from being happy, and I'd rather be a fool who felt joy for 5 months than a wise man who feels nothing at all. So here I am, back where I started, older and poorer, and maybe a little wiser about the difference between love and need, between companionship and transaction, between hope and delusion. My retirement account looks like it got hit by a financial tornado, but my heart feels like it survived something important, something that taught me I'm still capable of feeling things I thought were gone forever. That has to count for something, even if it doesn't pay the bills or buy back the time I spent believing in fairy tales. I thought I was becoming a father again. Turns out I was just the ATM in someone else's business plan. But for those brief, shining moments when I believed in us, when I believed in the future she painted with her words and her tears and her gentle touches on my aging skin, I was the happiest I'd been since Sarah died. And no one can take that away from me. Not Lalida with her carefully practiced tears and her phantom ultrasounds. Not the people who will shake their heads and call me a fool when they hear this story. Not even the truth itself, which burns like disinfectant on a wound but eventually helps the healing begin. I bought 5 months of believing in love again, and maybe that's not the worst investment a lonely old man ever made. Maybe it's the only investment that really matters, even when it bankrupts you. Maybe especially when it bankrupts you.